Hello and welcome to yet another session of I Tell Differently podcast. Today our topic will be the origin of submarines. How this underwater boat or underwater vehicle which is or which has been used for destroying ships, destroying uh, coastal defense of multiple countries in World War One, World War Two, and many other significant wars, these submarines have taken a place of importance. They have often attributed as the underwater guards of a country which has a large coastal belts. So, how this vehicle has been invented, who invented it, where it was invented, today's podcast is all about that. So, I have titled it as The Origin of Submarine from the American Turtle to the Fenian Ram. So let us begin. Uh, the first underwater boat was built in England during the reign of James I with a crude boat of no value other than curiosity. Out of curiosity, the king had developed this underwater boat. After then, other boats were built, and although none of them are not as significant historically or technically or even mechanically, but the first undersea boat of historical importance was the American Turtle built by the American David Bushnell. It was developed during the Revolutionary War of America. After then, the next record of a new underwater vehicle is about the Nautilus, which was invented by an American, Robert Fulton, but it was used by the French people. The King Napoleon was very fond of different inventions of Robert Fulton. One of them was a steamboat, which is famously referred as Nautilus. As all of you know, Nautilus was that famous underwater vehicle which is described in the famous story of H.G. Wells. So the owner of that Nautilus was King Nero, and here the owner of Nautilus was King Napoleon. So the Robert Fulton was the inventor, but it was all utilized, but not very. King was not very satisfied with this type of vehicles, so that is why it was not continued, and even the Fulton was not sustained by the French Admiral, and ultimately Fulton sold his invention to the British government against a petty cost of $75,000. Keeping in view the impact of this invention on the history of underwater vehicles, the price at which Fulton sold his invention to the British government is very, very small. After Fulton, uh, after Fulton, the submarine. that next came into the practical view is the davits. This was invented and utilized in the American Civil War when the Confederate government built several such vehicles. They are usually known as davits. Davids. Now, uh, on the night of February 17, 1864, one of the Davids, it was famously known as Hunley, Hunley, blew up the steamship known as Housatonic in the Charleston harbor. The wave caused by the explosion swarmed the submarine also. Along with the submarine, its crew was also swarmed away, and all the crew died in their watery grave. So, practically, this Hunley submarine killed its own crew. Now, other submarines that were built and experimented with, not only in the United States, but in the European countries also. One of the later inventors was an Irish American named as John P. Holland, who in 1876 built a submarine called the Fenian Ram. The Ram collapsed with the collapse of the Fenian movement. After then also other boats were built and tried, but the successful period of the submarine was deferred until 1893 when the United States Congress appropriated $2 lakh to encourage such type of inventions and also enterprises which can thrive based on these type of inventions. They were encouraged to submit designs, new designs, innovative designs, just as we do nowadays in our hackathons or startup competitions. Those enterprise at that time they can be referred as startup or who are interested in developing submarines, and they are encouraged to submit designs. This and a similar movement in France formed the first official recognition of the value of vessels of this class. Before this, these type of vessels were not valued. They are not given their due recognition because they often failed their purpose. The prize offered by the Congress brought out three designs, among which there was one by Mr. Holland, the rum inventor, one by Judge C. Barker, and a third by Simon Lake. The names of Holland and Lake have since been closely associated with the history of the submarine. Mr. Holland's device secured approval, and in 1894 he received a contract also to build that type of submarine vessel. This type of submarine vessel is named as the plunger. Now, its development started from 1895, but it was also finally abandoned. And a vessel of different type, the Holland, this time it is named as Holland in the name of its inventor, was built in its place. This vessel, Holland, was accepted by the government in 1900, and a number of others similar to the Holland were subsequently built. The type of these vehicles was what became known as the diving. They were controlled by a rudder placed at the stern of the vessel and acting in both horizontal and vertical direction. The force of the screw propeller driving the boat forward in the direction desired, Then in 1904, the Navy of the United States, they buy or procure 8 Holland boats, and after then they were also found in the British Navy. Now let us come back to the Mr. Lake's design, which also won that competition. Mr. Lake's design, offered in 1893 but not accepted, had as its noble feature a plan by which a door could be opened in the bottom of the ship. This type of feature was not available in Holland or any previous type of or contemporary submarine designs. That door can be opened in the bottom of the ship, and the crew can leave and enter it in diving suits. Right? So the water being kept out by the force of compressed air. This capability is still there in the modern submarines also. It was only developed, it was advanced by the uh, modern engineers, but this concept is there till now. To maintain the vessel on an even keel, he introduced 4 vanes, and these vanes are called hydroplanes for regulating the depth of descent. By aid of these and the horizontal rudder, it was found that the vessel would run for hours at a constant depth and on a level keel. There were other devices for diving or rising to the surface. So, after then, in the year of 1901, Mr. Lake built a large vessel of this type. Same concept, but it was bigger, which was then sold to the Russian government and was in commission at Vladivostok during the Russian-Japanese War. He afterwards received orders from other governments also. And his principles of control have since been generally adopted as the safest and most reliable controlling agency for underwater craft. Now, you know, till now, in the above description that I have made, the summary of all different types of attempts to invent a satisfactory underwater boat was discussed. In several of the nations of Europe, experiments, more or less available, had been tried, but the most practical results were achieved by the American inventors like Bushnell, Fulton, Davy, Holland, and Lake. They are all American. Their inventions were practically applied with greater level of satisfaction. It is sufficient here to say that the most successful of submarines were those constructed by Holland and Lake, the two winners of that competition, uh, which was uh, which was what I can say, which was conducted for a grant of $2 lakh uh, in the year of I think 1893. Okay, so uh, so that is why although Bushnell has developed his submarine quite earlier, right? And following Bushnell, Fulton made his invention, and following Fulton, Davy made his invention. Davy's invention were followed by Holland and Lake. Holland and Lake are two contemporary inventors. But all these 4 designs are quite practical, quite acceptable by the army of his country. Now, an important addition was made in the year of 1901 in a French boat, the Morse, built at Cherbourg. The difficulty of navigators telling where they were when underwater and of changing their course safely without coming to the surface to reconnoiter was in a large measure overcome by of a periscope. This rising above the water and provided with reflecting lenses enabled the steersman to discover the surface condition and see whether any near vessels or other objects are present. The Morse was the first underwater sea vehicle to use a periscope. So this very new feature that was added to this French boat Morse made it able to sink in only 70 seconds, and her crew could remain underwater for 16 hours without any strain. Okay, so this is more or less the history of submarines from the, as I have told you in the beginning, from the American turtle to the Fenian Ram. Although, as you can note, after the Fenian Ram, this we have also invented the Holland lake, and ultimately the most advanced invention in relation to submarines were made by the French, which is the Morse, which has the ability to see its surface from underwater. So that made them capable to observe the surface before it rises up. So it avoids collision with ship which are floating above the water, or with mines which are floating above the water, and also it can easily fire torpedoes to the enemy ship without the necessity to come above the water, and that is the only reason why they were swept away, as I have discussed that in the during the American Civil War. What happened is the year was 1864. That time Davids were developed in large numbers, right? And Holland was the inventor at that time, right? So, but what happened is during or when these Davids, or I would say rather one of the Davids named Hunley, tried to blew up the ship Housatonic in Charleston harbor, the ship exploded. It was destroyed, but the wave caused by the explosion swamped the submarine also, and along it with it, the crew also drowned in its watery grave. Okay, so this was the problem of Davids. Okay, and you know after then Holland developed its invention. So in the year 1876, the submarine Fenian Ram was developed, but the ram collapsed with the collapse of the Fenian movement. So accordingly, his invention were also destroyed.